Welcome to Mountains Made Low, where we help our listeners to encounter the love of God and live well in the modern world. I'm Dennis Smith.
And I'm Christine Reagan.
Speaking for herself today.
Speaking for herself, it's a little bit better. I'm getting back to who I used to be, much to the disappointment of so many.
This is true. Today, not to belabor a topic or beat a dead horse, but sandwiched between our last two episodes, Pope Leo released his first encyclical. And what did he choose to address? He chose to address artificial intelligence and its implications for our humanity. So how could we not spend some time unpacking what the Pope has had to say on this topic?
Yeah, I do think it would be a misstep for us to just move on to some random Catholic topic, which there's plenty of time to do that. But it's one thing for us to talk about AI and faith. But the conversation has taken on a whole new level of importance when the Pope weighs in and takes the time to share his thoughts on the matter. And I think it says a lot that the Pope chooses this topic for us to focus on in his first encyclical.
Yeah, that says a whole lot.
It does.
Yeah.
This encyclical was called Remaining Human in the Age of AI. It's a powerful, prophetic reflection on technology, humanity, and the future that we're building together as a society and as a people. And so today we're going to talk about it, and we're going to go through some highlights. I mean, I've been a big fan of Leo's teaching style ever since I started reading his weekly audiences. And so I would encourage, and I think you would as well, I would encourage everybody to give this a read. Put aside however you feel about Pope Leo. Sometimes morality is influencing that opinion. Sometimes politics is influencing that opinion. This is worth your time because it's something that affects just the human heart, the human person, where we're going.
Well, we're all connected.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's definitely something that's going to speak and have relevance to us more so than maybe some of the other issues that the church wades into from time to time.
And I think, the Pope's he's going to release, God willing, several encyclicals. I don't know that I really remember any other one. Well, there's one very famous Francis one, but I do remember like John Paul's first one, Benedict's first one, Francis's first one, and now Leo's first one. So there is something about it being the first.
Yeah.
Right? In the same way that the Pope takes a motto, in the same way that the Pope takes a name. Right? What do you choose to do first?
Yeah. So, like, where's his primary focus going to be? And I have to be honest with you, like, you talk about AI like, it's going to be all about computers, technology, and all this other stuff. But I have to be honest, because this one kind of grabbed my heart because it's not just about AI or digital culture, because the church can say whatever it wants on that. What the church does when it speaks to these issues is it really gets into the impact that some of these things have on our humanity, on our identity. When you really take a look through this encyclical, it's about who we are. It's about what kind of people we are becoming and what kind of world that we are building. And it really speaks to who God is and how we can encounter him in a world that is changing fast.
Or how we can ignore him.
Well, that too.
Right, as we're just moving rapidly into the
flip
future.
Side. Yeah, that's the flip side of what he's talking about in this encyclical. And I think if we're honest, most people aren't lying awake at night thinking about the social doctrine of the church. But they are lying.
You don't know what keeps me up at night, Dennis. You have no idea.
but they are lying awake thinking about, why am I so tired? Why do I feel behind all the time? Why do I compare myself to everyone online? Why do I fall into that trap? Why does my job feel like I'm competing with machines? And why do my kids seem more anxious and depressed than I ever did growing up? These are the things that keep people awake.
Well, how often do you hear people say, especially older people say, gosh, I don't know how you'd raise kids in this kind of generation. Yeah. Or, I worry about my kids and my grandkids. So it's all a different iteration of what you're saying.
Yeah.
The good thing is that with this encyclical, we know that the Pope sees all of this too. And he writes that technology now shapes, quote, the collective imagination. And that, quote, never has humanity had such power over itself. You think about your phone, think about your inbox, your news feed, your job, and how you relate to your job differently than maybe you did a year ago, 5 years ago. How you do your job. People do their jobs so radically differently.
Yeah. And your heart. Because the real question is, what is all this technology and AI doing to our souls? And the Pope wastes no time wading into this question. He opens with a rather dramatic choice saying, and here's another quote, humanity is today facing a pivotal choice, either to construct a new Tower of Babel or to build the city in which God and humanity dwell together.
I love that there's just two destination options.
Right. Babel, or for him, this new city, which God and humanity dwells, is Jerusalem. So you have Babel and Jerusalem. So right from the outset, the Pope is laying out two possible outcomes for humanity's relationship with artificial intelligence and technology. It's either going to lead to our separation from God and fragmentation with each other, as Babel did, or it'll bring us into communion with God and each other. And the outcome really ultimately depends on how we use AI.
Yeah.
Right? How we use technology.
Because technology can assist us. Technology cannot save us.
And as we've talked about in other episodes, I mean, if you take a look at some of the teen stats, they're spending 9 hours of their day looking at, I'm not going to say cat videos, but because that would probably be
Actually,
people,
I'd enjoy that.
That would probably be people of my generation. But looking at TikTok videos and YouTube videos and mindlessness, but they don't have time to pray. They don't have time for Mass. You can see where...
They don't know how to take time, period.
And they don't know how to be quiet. All these things that we've explored, it could be problematic.
Okay.
So he wades into all this.
He does. He immediately says that all of this is rooted in Christ. And he writes that it is only, quote, in the mystery of the Word made flesh, right? We're talking about Jesus, that the mystery of humanity becomes clear, right? And now that's straight from Gaudium et Spes, which is a document of Vatican II, right? The church in the modern world, right? So this is almost like a new iteration of Gaudium et Spes. Yeah. Because what's the most...
Because there was no internet.
Well, there was no internet. Like, what makes this age definitive in its own way? The use of artificial intelligence, the use of technology and AI. So right away, he's saying, if you want to understand technology and society in the future, that you have to start with Jesus and with the human person. The Catechism says the dignity of the human person is rooted in his creation in the image and likeness of God.
Yeah. The whole encyclical really is about protecting the dignity, your dignity, our dignity, so we can encounter God and really flourish in this life. It's rooted in the context of social justice. And
what is social justice? Can you define that for people?
It's about the needs of humanity, meeting the needs of humanity. So some social justice issues would be the migrant issues, caring for the poor.
Medical ethics,
solidarity, all of these things, some cultural issues.
So things that affect people and the globe as a whole.
Yeah,
right?
and community.
Ultimately, it's all a violation of human dignity, right? If you're not if somebody's poor and they're not having their needs met, it's because we're not recognizing the dignity that they have and that they are worth serving. We're not seeing Christ in them. So it all does get rooted back into that we're not loving them as we should.
And I think that's a good point, Christine, because I think sometimes we're couching this in the context of social justice. Some people are like, well, how's this social justice? This is technology. What does this have to do with social justice? But it plays into social justice because of that point, because there's such a danger, and we see it, we've acknowledged it. There's such a danger for technology and AI to reduce the dignity of the human person.
I think part of the problem with social justice today, or just the way people use it, there's no problem with social justice because ultimately it should be rooted in God, but it's the way that people have divorced Jesus from social justice. And they've just been, well, we can be charitable without Jesus.
It's social causes.
Right. Yeah. It's not really love-oriented. It's just, it's about something else apart from the person of Jesus.
And so Leo really gives us these two biblical images to understand our moment at this time. It's Babel, the Tower of Babel, which is the Old Testament, and then we have Jerusalem. So let's start with Babel, because I love the imagery that he uses. He describes it as a project, and here's a quote, conceived without reference to God, built on uniformity and the desire to make a name for ourselves. So Leo really uses Babel as a symbol of a world that is built on fear, on control, on self-creation. And if we were to translate that into 2026, it's really our compulsion to build my brand.
Oh, we hear that all the in the influencing culture. That's all they talk about.
To stay relevant, to optimize myself, and to keep up with the Joneses of the world. And so I know many people who confess that they feel like they are living in a constant performance review, where every word, every action, even every smile is being evaluated and critiqued. And I really think in my own ministry, I think teens are especially susceptible to all of this. Mm-hmm. because they're always comparing themselves to one another and just trying to find their way in all these things. So I think this is timely because it's speaking to the current condition and everything that we're dealing with in society right now. It affects everybody.
Yeah, it seems to be the temptation of our age. And we've talked about this in the past. It's rooted in the human desire to have self-curation, to create the perfect identity, whether it's online or in real life. This can flow into your everyday conversations and how you go to work and how you go to family events, right? How can I be perfect in the eyes of these people? I can't put a foot wrong. Right. I can't show any kind of
the persona,
weakness.
The persona that you have in work is very, very different from the persona that you have when you go out with your friends.
God forbid
Friday
those
night.
two friend groups meet. It's a disaster, right? No. Yeah. But you want to control everything. You want to eliminate weakness. Ultimately, you want to build a life without God where I become then this God of my own making. So it's like a civilization that's marked by pride and the pursuit of power detached from truth.
Yeah. And it never works.
Well, what happens to Babel?
Well, Babel collapses, right? I mean, it falls. Relationships break. Communication breaks. Hearts break.
Yeah.
So this is not...
It's not sustainable. It's not going to work.
It's not sustainable.
It's not going to work. Yeah. Saint Irenaeus said, what is he, 2nd century Irenaeus? Yeah. So he said, the glory of God is man fully alive.
And I love that quote.
It's a fairly well-known quote, but we don't say it enough. Babel is man half alive. Right? Sure, man is more efficient. He's more productive. He can be more impressive, right? Look at what I built. And sometimes, I remember when Apple, I don't know if they still do this, but they would release a new device or something and they would have a whole convention about it. Like, look at what we did. Look at how we made it bigger and better. And I'm not saying that those technologies and tools are not useful, but it's very self-indulgent, right? Look at what we did.
Self-glorification.
Right. We can do even more. The possibilities are endless. But at what expense? And again, I'm not casting any condemnation on these things that mankind has produced. Yeah. But has it had an expense on the soul?
Yeah.
Has it done detriment to the human person? Babel leads, I would argue, and I think you would too, it leads to greater isolation, loneliness, and self-gratification. That's why it crumbled to begin with, because it's not good for the human person. God didn't want us to build a Babel in the past, and he doesn't want us to build one now. Now I think we're making little mini Babels all over the place. There's not one big tower. There's multiple towers. So they're like contingency towers.
Yeah.
So instead, what Leo gives us is Nehemiah rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. People are going to have to go back and read the story of the Tower of Babel. Because if you're off the boat at Nehemiah, then you got to know what we're talking about.
Yeah, but I think that you need to go back and take a look at the story because a lot of people aren't familiar with that story either and how that unfolded.
Yeah.
But he uses these great analogies here to paint a almost like a biblical portrait of what's taking place today.
We'll put the citations for these stories in the description. I think Babel's somewhere in Genesis 10 or 11, something like that. I don't know where Nehemiah is, but it's further than that. What Leo's telling us is that Nehemiah rebuilds the walls of Jerusalem following the return from that Babylonian exile. And the Pope highlights that Nehemiah, quote, did not impose solutions from above, but he listened. He walked the ruins, he gathered families, and assigned each of them a section of the wall to rebuild. Yeah. He rebuilt relationships before stones. And there's a real lesson to be learned when it comes to the power and the influence of AI. We can't run from technology. It's here to stay. And it does make our lives more convenient, easier. It can be beneficial for many of us. But can we find a way that we can use it that will help us better listen to each other and serve each other and strengthen relationships? And that's going to lead to unity, which is what Leo said was...
And the answer to that is yes.
Mm-hmm.
So Pope Leo really emphasizes that whereas Babel offers humanity domination, demands uniformity, and really glorifies our self-assertion and our self-creation, Jerusalem, on the other hand, invites collaboration, offers communion, and emphasizes our shared responsibility and the dignity of all. That's the beauty of it. I mean, St. Augustine said, peace is the tranquility of order. And Jerusalem really is ordered toward God, whereas Babel was really ordered more toward the self, where it's inward focusing rather than outward focusing.
And if you're wondering where this Jerusalem image is coming from, that's where the temple was. That's where God dwelled. That's the mountain of the Lord. You go to Jerusalem.
It's the city of God.
You are encountering God. You're offering sacrifice to God. So it's where at least once a year, the Jewish people would go to meet God and to dwell with him.
To gather in communion, right? And there was one particular line in the document that hit me hard, and it's right where Leo wrote, and this is the quote, in the era of artificial intelligence, ours is the pressing duty to remain profoundly human. Now, you wouldn't think that would need to be called out, right? But it does, because of the way I think that we could use AI and end up losing our humanity in the process. And we've highlighted this in some of the other episodes that we've done over time.
But we've never had this image of Babel in Jerusalem before.
No.
If there's two things that I want you to remember from this encyclical, it's these images. What world do you want to live in?
Because we cannot lose our humanity in the pursuit of technology and efficiency. And that's really what Leo is speaking to. Because the human person cannot be reduced to data or a commodity. We are more than algorithms to determine trends, business decisions, and marketing. And so when we reduce the human person in such a way, it destroys our inherent God-given dignity.
But Leo also reminds us that remaining human means embracing our limits. And this is what the people in Babel the Tower of Babel, were not willing to give into, right? It was
pride.
It's a limitless existence that we can build for ourselves.
Yeah.
The Pope warns against the prospect of a technology that promises to free us from all weakness, as though weakness is a problem, right?
Yeah.
We would all love to not be weak. We can put that in its own category. That's true. Yeah. But what does Scripture say? 2 Corinthians says that my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. Right? If we weren't weak, we would have no need of God to begin with.
Yeah, whose power is made perfect?
My power is made perfect in weakness. Yeah. Hence, I will boast most gladly of my weaknesses, in order that the power of Christ may dwell within me. For this reason, I rejoice when I endure weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and distress for the sake of Christ. And this is what people know well, for it is when I am weak, I am strong. Yeah. Right? Total paradox. These two things that should not go together.
Well, that's the Christian life.
It's the Christian life. It's also the wonderfully good news.
Yeah.
That this is what is in store for us.
It's okay to be weak. I don't need to be perfect.
We're going to flounder, right, all the way to we're just going to disintegrate into nothingness. My weakness is going to ultimately be my downfall. Jesus says, no, your weakness is going to be the opening for my grace for you.
Well, but that's because it's in our weakness that God meets us. You know, this is where love happens, and we don't see it this way. You really need to have wisdom. You really need to have godly wisdom in order to be able to see this.
I don't want to be weak.
It's almost like suffering. You know, suffering's along the same kind of parallel here. But if someone loves me, despite my weakness and my failures, then I know with absolute certainty that I am truly loved. I know my true worth because of that relationship. And this is where true communion with one another is born. This is true communion. This is true communion with God. This is where it's born. So for those listening today, I'm telling you, like, if you feel overwhelmed, you feel behind, you don't feel optimized, if you feel like your life is just one big performance review or that you have to be perfect in order to be loved, know that you are not failing. You're not failing anything. You're human, and God delights in who you are, despite your flaws, despite your imperfections, even if you are wrestling with a sense of worthlessness. Because we are told time and time again that God delights in us, that we are his beloved sons and daughters, heirs to the kingdom and his adopted children. And we don't need to do anything to earn any of this. God looks at us this way because we are his, and he loves us. It's that simple. And the beautiful thing is about this analogy, especially with Nehemiah, the way the Pope frames this is, you know, when we take a look at Jesus, Jesus is always rebuilding us. And like Nehemiah, he walks the ruins of our heart, not to shame us, not to condemn us, as the world attempts to, but to rebuild us from the inside out. That's the beauty there. And this is, like I said, I mean, this is where the social justice aspect comes in, because he brings Christ, he brings God, he brings human dignity right into the heart of this issue that deals with technology and artificial intelligence.
And another great truth that the Pope is rooting this encyclical in is the tradition of Catholic social teaching, like you're saying, beginning with Rerum Novarum. So that is when was that written?
I'm just glad you said it, because I probably would have butchered it.
You couldn't say Rerum Novarum? Really?
No. I probably would have.
Can you say your own name? Can you? That is the very famous, I don't know if it's an encyclical or if it's an apostolic exhortation, but it's what Pope Leo XIII is known for.
Right.
And it's all about the rights of the human person, the dignity of the human person in light of a culture that will work you to death, frankly.
Right. Human condition. This stuff comes up all the time, over and over again. It just rears its head in a different ugly form.
Right. I've heard this encyclical called like the new Rerum Novarum, because this is, Rerum Novarum is addressing a particular threat to the human person. This is just as much of a threat in an entirely different way. And he calls it a living corpus of truth. Right. What a great way. What a great phrase. The church isn't afraid of new questions. She walks with us, and together we form a living body of truth, because as disciples of Jesus Christ, we put on the mind of Christ and are conformed into his image. And in turn, the church listens. And the Pope quotes Gaudium et Spes again and says, "It is the task of the whole people of God to listen to and distinguish the many voices of our times." Think about sound bites and platitudes and the echo chamber of social media that have nothing to do with listening. It's all about trying to be heard.
Yeah.
And that's what I think the Pope is challenging us to do in this encyclical. He's challenging us to listen and discern by asking, where's Jesus in all of this? And how do we follow him today? How do we protect the human person? Body, soul, relationships, community. Are we willing to trade the human person for all of this and the benefits that we see?
Yeah. So I guess the question for us then is, what does the new Jerusalem look like in 2026, if this is the analogy that the Pope is putting forward? I think it's a simple image. It's as simple as putting the phone down at dinner and engaging each other in relationship, using that time, which is a precious commodity in today's age, to actually be present to and with each other and sharing our lives with each other. It's communities caring for the elderly rather than shoving them off to the side because they are no longer productive or valuable or they're burdensome to care for. It's churches welcoming the lonely and giving them a place where they can experience love and belonging. And it's realizing my self-worth rests in whom God has declared me to be, not the image that I project or that I try to curate for myself or who others say that I am.
And once again, none of this is achievable without us speaking the name of Jesus, recognizing that he is the beginning and the end of all of this. Mm-hmm. It can become an exercise in pride if we think, well, I can do all this myself. Or look at all the great things that humans have done for other humans, right? If you're not recognizing, whether you're acknowledging Christ's presence or not, Christ is the reason that anything good happens ever, and we can't take him out of it.
Yeah.
So all of this has to have a humility about all of it. St. Benedict said that the first step of humility is simply listening. And we kind of, just a couple weeks ago, we talked about him, Pope Leo, being like the listening pope, if we could give him a title among many. But this pope is very clear about the dangers. He notes that private companies now hold, and listen to this, more power and influence than many governments, because of the concentrated technological power that they hold. This affects elections, mental health, the pharmaceutical industry, what news we see, what truth they want us to embrace, and how we think. So these companies and entities see the human person as someone to be programmed and groomed and influenced and manipulated. And why do they do that, Dennis?
To make a profit.
To make money.
Yeah, to make money.
Yeah. So he warns against this Babel syndrome, a quote from the encyclical, where we build a world where efficiency replaces dignity, uniformity replaces communion, and self-creation replaces dependence on God. It's this spiritual illness that emerges when technological power is used to escape our humanity rather than to deepen it. This is like very Manichaean. Like the body is bad, the spirit is good. It's like this new kind of, we're going to make your humanity irrelevant, or you're going to see its limitations so much so that we can make you into something else. It's a little Borg-esque. I don't know.
Yeah. That was a good Star Trek reference.
Thank
there.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
But you get that reference,
yeah, I do.
right?
I get that
It's
reference.
like we can be better as a collective than you are as a human individual.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You were saved by a human individual.
Yeah.
And that's Jesus. Sorry, in case we didn't, right? Jesus alone died on the cross. His body, his humanity actually underwent death and then resurrection.
Yeah, and really, to be honest with you, that's what really gives us our dignity. Our dignity stems from that, because God himself took on human form and became one of us in the person of Jesus. Not to mention, at the very outset, we're created in his image and likeness. And this is a universal dignity. It doesn't matter how rich, how poor, the color of your skin, how educated you are. Every human person shares in this equal dignity. And it's easy for us to lose that when we begin to treat one another as a commodity, or we begin to look at like, what can they do for me? What can I get out of them? We trade off things for efficiency at the expense of human dignity. I mean, just take a look at how many people have been put out of jobs because their work has been automated or taken over by machines. And now you have these people that are unemployed and maybe they don't have necessary skills to do something else. And society's not really doing much to help them.
Well, you're not valuable anymore,
right,
in the way that you used to be. So maybe your life isn't worth living. I mean, that's the lie that you can buy into. And there's no end to the things that the human person maybe can't do on its own.
Yeah.
But why don't we stop focusing on what the human person can't do and think about what we can do, what we were made to do? Isn't that so much better?
It's
and
the art of possibility.
You know what the coolest thing about this encyclical was? And I know that I've mentioned Lord of the Rings a lot lately, but do you know that he quoted Gandalf in this encyclical?
No, I missed it.
Oh my gosh. You had one job, Dennis. No. So Pope Leo here quotes Lord of the Rings, which to me just took my breath away because I am in the zone
well, that's it. You're
with those
be a
stories in
fan
that
of this
movie.
Pope forever.
But he says this. He quotes one of Gandalf. This is paragraph 213 in the encyclical, and he quotes one of Gandalf's famous speeches in the Lord of the Rings. And he says, quote, "It is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the succor of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till." And then Pope Leo adds his own line here. He says, "The civilization of love will not arise from a single or spectacular gesture, but from the sum total of small and steadfast acts of fidelity that serve as a bulwark against dehumanization."
Yeah.
So what is Pope Leo actually telling us? He's telling us to go watch and read Lord of the Rings so that we understand. Because frankly, Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings because he was really upset and saw the dangers of the Industrial Revolution.
Sure.
And because of the war and the weapons and all of the automation that was going on and how detrimental it was to society and to the human person. So something to think about. Did I derail the podcast?
No, not at all. I like that quote because it's going to tie into something I think that we're going to bring everything to conclusion with. But it's that idea of each family doing their own part. Just rebuild your section of the wall.
And also, I mean, there's a line in the books and the movies where Frodo says, "I wish none of this had happened." He's talking about the ring. And I think they do this in Moria, where he says, "So do all who live to see such times. But that's not for us to decide. All we have to do is decide what to do with the time that's given to us." That is something that would never come from a machine, right? Only people can hear that and respond accordingly, right? Not what can I do? What must I do? What's the next right thing to do? That's a deeply human thing. Right. That's a very courageous thing to do. And technology, as amazing as it can be, it's not courageous. Anytime you talk about courage, you're in the realm of the human person, not a machine.
Yeah. That kind of speaks to the heart of language, which Leo also speaks about in this encyclical, because he reminds us that when it comes to Babel only had one language, which he used as a metaphor for reducing people to data, forcing everyone into the same digital systems, flattening human experience into metrics and algorithms, and treating diversity as a problem to be solved. And so what Leo does is he warns against, and here's a quote, "the pretense that a single language, even a digital one, can translate everything into data and performance." I mean, this is the very heart of dehumanization. And so when efficiency and profit are idolized and viewed as the end goal of technology and AI, the weak and the most vulnerable are sacrificed. And we see this today. Now, Leo doesn't speak to this, and I'm waiting. I'm chomping at the bit for the church to kind of wade into this. When we talk about efficiency and profit being idolized, take a look at these data centers that are being built across the country and the environmental impact that it's having on these local communities. I mean, there's
where people live,
right? I mean,
that's why it's a problem.
they're getting all of these tax breaks and incentives and all of these things because it's bringing industry into the neighborhood. I was reading somewhere that there's one data center down, I'm going to say West Virginia or Virginia, that the amount that they're collecting in taxes from that is enough to cover the place's entire budget for the year. But people are getting up in the morning and they're turning on their faucet and sludge is coming out because all of the water that is available is being sucked up by this data center. So there's
Because it's burning up. That's why.
so there's all of these things, and this is the other side of things that we have to look at. This is why this is a social justice issue, because efficiency becomes more important than people, and productivity becomes a measure of worth. And the poor really become obstacles to progress, and the vulnerable are too expensive to care for.
Right.
And so the Pope keeps returning to the poor, the elderly, the sick, the migrant, because technology and AI are treating them as what he calls the rejected stones, the stones that are being rejected by the builder. And I love that imagery, right? Because
who's the rejected stone?
it's Jesus, and Jesus Jesus says you're always going to have the poor with them. It's often in the poor that we encounter Jesus, and we have a chance to be Jesus to one another.
And the scripture is what? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.
Yeah, I just love the analogy. I love the analogy that he made there.
In Genesis, the builders say, "Let us build a tower, lest we be scattered." Babel was built out of fear, and Leo sees this fear permeating our society today, and it rears its head in many different ways. In our fear of being irrelevant, or falling behind, or being unseen, or of not being enough. I mean, these fears strike real chords in the hearts of many people today, and technology and AI can offer a sense of false hope that shields us from its vulnerability. But like weakness, vulnerability is where love happens. That's the dark side of tech and AI. It might be protecting me from having to be vulnerable, but it does so by isolating me and allowing me to operate with some level of anonymity.
Yeah.
And so technology can become a way to avoid dependence and weakness and real relationships, even with God, right?
Yeah.
I don't need anybody. I can hide behind all of these facades, and nobody will know that I'm in need, and therefore I don't have to be vulnerable. I don't have to put the responsibility on them to meet that need. I mean, it has so many interpersonal and societal implications.
Well, we just talked last week about how Amazon's coming out with something where you can kind of create your own podcast, cater to what you want to hear.
What if we told people that this whole time our podcast has been like Amazon? We've actually been the pilot program for Amazon. And unfortunately, it went so terribly that...
Take a look at the number of people that are turning to artificial intelligence for relationships. All of this is being dealt with in this encyclical. So let's get practical. The Pope doesn't just diagnose the Babel syndrome. He gives us a roadmap out of it. And it's not abstract. It's deeply human. And he writes that building a world where everyone can flourish, quote, requires shared responsibility and courage.
So, I made that courage thing up without even looking, without even expecting you to say that. So I just want people to know that there's something going on up here with me.
There is. I found this to be one of the most beautiful lines in the encyclical. Leo writes, all are given their own section of the wall. Scientists and researchers, entrepreneurs and workers, educators and legislators, civil society, popular movements, and faith communities. So their section of the wall isn't meant to be their niche. It's the portion that they have been commissioned to help rebuild. And for that portion to become part of the wall, their part really needs to be integrated into the whole.
It's like this new Great Commission. That's going on.
Yeah. And that's Nehemiah. That's subsidiarity. That's real life. And this is the world being rebuilt, not by experts alone, but by ordinary people doing ordinary things with extraordinary love. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so freeing because you don't have to fix the whole world. I sit back and say, well, what could I possibly do in order to remedy this? Or what part can I possibly play? I can't do anything. This problem is so big. And what the Pope is saying and what Nehemiah would say is, no, this is your section of the wall. You have your family, you have your work, you have your friends. You rebuild that. Mm-hmm. That's all you have to do. And that then makes things very, very manageable for me. I don't have to solve the AI ethic issues. I don't have to outpace the algorithm. You just have to be faithful with your section of the wall, which entails your family, your parish, your coworkers, your neighborhood. That's where Jesus meets you and gets you to introduce him to others.
Yeah, all you have to do is decide what to do with the time that's given to you.
That's right. I love it. This is where real encounter happens. When you show up for your kids, when you check in on your elderly neighbor, when you pray with your spouse, when you choose honesty at work. That's rebuilding the wall. That's Jerusalem spirituality. This is what the Pope is saying.
And I think we have to make some mention of the Mass and all this too, because the whole purpose of this, we're sent out to rebuild our sections of the wall because we're drawn together in the liturgy, in the sacraments,
In communion.
we're sanctified
with communion,
together
yeah.
as we come forth to receive. Because so many people will say, well, yeah, I'll donate money to this charity. I can do
Yeah.
this. And they don't see the sacramental necessity of what's going on in the church and how you're only dispersed and commissioned out because you're drawn in.
Yeah.
So
You're drawn in and you're sent.
and you're sent.
Right.
Right.
That's
And we're talking about
assessed.
going to mass, people. That's
Right.
what we're talking about.
Yeah.
The Pope says building a city founded on the common good implies building a firm relationship with God. Where does that happen? Well, that happens in a number of ways, but primarily through participating in the life of the church.
Yeah.
Right? And really in the life of Christ Jesus himself. It's not pious wallpaper. It's not my wallpaper is something about trusting in the Lord that I look at every day. And listen, it does call to mind important things, but that's not the whole of my spirituality. That's
Right.
one little thing. It's anthropology. If God isn't the reference point, then something else is going to be. If you're not worshiping God, you're going to worship something else, usually efficiency, productivity, or money at the end of all
if you're not
this.
spending
Or
time with
yourself.
God during the day, that time's going to be filled with other things.
Right. This is where we lose ourselves. So when I talk to people who feel overwhelmed or spiritually numb, it's almost always because life has become a series of tasks rather than a relationship. I have to do this, this, and this. And putting God at the center of all that means asking in every decision, does this help me love God and love people? That's the heart of discipleship. That's what relationship is. The same goes for how we use language. So the Pope said that we have to avoid, quote, humiliating and antagonistic words, and instead choose a language that sheds light and unlocks new possibilities. I mean, that's so, people get into so much trouble with their mouths. I would know from experience. If people just stopped talking, they wouldn't get into so much trouble.
I've said novenas.
But we need to hear this today because our culture speaks in outrage and sarcasm and fear. I mean, that's what rage baiting is. And they said that, the internet and the algorithms and the powers that be, and I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but there are powers that be in all this. They said they found something that's better. Like sex used to be the hook. What can bait people better than sex? Rage.
Yeah.
They say anger is actually more profitable monetarily than sex is. That's terrifying because often those things actually go together. Our culture speaks in outrage, sarcasm, and fear. And the gospel speaks differently. The gospel speaks in truth and mercy and love. And people are really starving for that. And people are probably going to be surprised when they hear it because what are they used to hearing? So when you speak in clarity and kindness, you become like a sign of contradiction in the culture. And you become a place of rest for people, not for things, not for machines, but for people. You become a witness. You become a place where people can go to experience Christ himself. This is how we're going to be able to resist like the digital shouting match and become a people of communion.
Yeah. And Leo challenges us in this encyclical to really prioritize the poor, those stones that we talked about earlier, those stones that are being rejected by the builders. He states unequivocally that these stones will become the cornerstone. And this isn't platitudes, it's not sentimentality, it's the gospel lived in action. This is us living in solidarity with the poor. John Chrysostom said, if you cannot find Christ in the beggar at the church door, you will not find him in the chalice. That's powerful.
Yeah.
It's a reminder.
Well, think about it. It's like the Pharisee or the church official who's in the front,
Yeah.
and the tax collector who's in the back.
I mean, it reminds us that the one who our heart longs for most is waiting for us to encounter him in the poor and the vulnerable. They're there for us to love. They're there.
They have
for
something
us
to teach
love.
us.
They have something to teach us, exactly. And just as Jesus went out to the marginalized, the rejected, the lonely, and the poor to bear God's love, so do we. We're called to do that by virtue of our baptism. This is the heart of living as a disciple of Christ Jesus.
So I use AI, maybe not on a daily basis, but I use it maybe several times throughout the week. How do you engage with it?
I use it a lot as an assistant work.
Okay.
So if I'm crafting like an email response,
Emails.
Yeah.
Ooh, it can smooth out
it does.
that rage that we sometimes have.
Not that I'm composing things with rage, but maybe I want to
am.
have come across with like a little bit more of a pastoral tone.
Sure.
or I'm trying to make sure that my language isn't come across as accusatory or something
Sure.
like that. I'll take an email that might be a little bit on the sensitive side, and I'll just run it through like an AI thing and just say, review this for clarity in pastoral terms.
But you are writing first.
I'm writing first.
See, and I think that's so important. So I agree. I do the same thing because I have a real hard time. There's this thing on Amazon now where AI is like generating books. I don't know how this is happening or who's behind
Stories,
it.
all
But
that
books and
stuff.
stories, they're all AI generated. And frankly, I remember on St. Patrick's Day, I put on like pub songs on YouTube, something like that. And it was like 2 hours of pub songs. And some of them I was like, Sean, I love this song. I got to download this. It was 2 hours of AI generated music. You can't find it anywhere else. None of it's real. The singers are not real. This was beautiful playing and singing and everything. And it was all fake. And it threw me for a loop. And I realized, the beauty of music is that it's coming from somebody else, like another mind, another heart.
The soul.
It's coming from the soul, right? And that's what killed me, that there's something relationally that's lost. And I, in particular, love live music. I love when people do like a live album because I can hear things in between just stanzas, like breathing and I don't know, it just makes it so much more real for me. And
I've
so
had a lot of people say that about our podcast. They love to hear you breathe into the mic.
Let me give them a little more of it now. But and it made me think about why I like to read sometimes what I read, even if we're talking about Lord of the Rings or if we're talking about some of the homilies that Leo has written and the audiences. It's all because I feel like there's something about my mind and a mind from the past or a mind that I don't really know intimately. There's like a moment of communion with people who I don't even know intimately, but I feel like I'm having an intimate encounter with them anyway. And I just think that there's no substitute for that in the entire world. I don't want to read a book that's entirely AI generated.
You're true, because I think sometimes you read a piece of poetry or even take like something like Lord of the Rings and maybe a quote that Tolkien uses and you're like, oh my gosh, he gets me.
He gets me,
Right.
not it gets me,
Right.
or the algorithm.
An algorithm, an AI doesn't get you.
No.
It's just producing based upon prompts. And it doesn't get anything. And I think that's why, like, when you take a look at some of these issues that are surfacing with people, especially young people, who are just turning to AI for some type of companionship, it's artificial. It's not real. They don't get you. They don't understand you. They don't empathize. It's all fake.
Yeah. The fact that some of these like scriptural commentaries came from some of the greatest theological minds and some of the holiest people that have ever lived really matters to those of us who are living in any age, but especially right now. To know that the church is so interconnected in that way, where it really doesn't matter that they existed in the past and I exist in the present and that there's going to be people in the future. We all have a oneness about us, but there has to be an us involved in all of that. That's how the church connects it together. We're people, we're body, we're soul, and we're all grafted onto the same tree of life. That is Jesus. And I get that's the end for me, even in something like these fake pub songs. There's like a Christological problem in all of it, ultimately, for me.
Yeah, because it's the absence of the human person.
Right. I don't feel like I'm connecting to other humans. And I think that that's what gives our soul, it feeds our soul in such a way that I worry that we won't realize that it's gone until the humans are not here in the same way. Or they don't know how to do it anymore.
Yeah.
They don't know how to write and to
And that's the
communicate.
babble. That's the babble that Leo is kind of throwing out there. I mean, is this the type of world that we want to create for ourselves, or do we want to create Jerusalem?
Yeah.
So
as we close today, let's leave you with a line from Pope Leo that is very simple, but it cuts right to the heart of everything that we're talking about today. And he says, and this is from the encyclical, "Ours is the pressing duty to remain profoundly human." That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
It'll take me a gazillion years to get there. Leo gets right to it.
Yeah.
Right? So sit with that for a moment. Not remain productive. It's not about being in competition with one another. It's not about being efficient, because, something is always going to do something better than you, maybe. Better in the sense of the time it takes, or better in the sense of what it's able to produce. But it's not going to be you. Yeah. It's not going to be you.
And you want to talk about efficiency. One of the things that I notice that you do all the time is you
Me?
always,
Oh,
you
no.
always say something like, just sit with that for a moment, ponder that for a moment, and then you jump right into into the next.
Well, because I
into
know
the
that
next
you,
thing. Your
I
thought
know
just
that you're
keeps
like,
going.
we gotta move. We have to.
Oh, so it's my fault.
Well, what people can do, they can pause. When I say that in the future, just pause the podcast for a second
I'll give you the timeout. I'll give you the timeout sign.
and go. Let's have a moment of silence for.
Right.
Okay, you're right. So let's sit with it for a moment. Now let's find out how awkward the silence really is. Okay, keep breathing into the microphone. That's good. Keep. We have to be human.
I know.
Humans need other humans.
And that's the invitation that Jesus gives us to. To be human the way he is human, open to the Father, open to others, open to love. And you don't need to build a tower, right? This isn't some type of monumental task that the Pope is challenging us to. You don't need to be impressive. You don't have to keep up with the machines or the Joneses. So, as you go about your week, the only thing that you have to do is just concentrate on your portion of the wall. Ask the Holy Spirit to show you, where am I building Babel in my life? And where is God inviting me to build Jerusalem? Just be faithful to your section of the wall, and Jesus will meet you there, and together you will recreate the world and build the kingdom of God.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. We'll put a link to the encyclical, so if you want to follow this up with that, that would be great. And we'll see you next week.
All right. God bless.